Yamunatiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradari Jaya Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Shri Shri Radha Madhava Ki Jai. So welcome to Srimad Bhagavatam class. We continue in the 4th canto, chapter 24, entitled Chanting the Song sung by Lord Shiva. We are at text 70. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Tam Evatmanam Atmastam Sarvaputesh Avastitam Puchayatvam Krinantash Cha Jyayantash Cha Sakrit Dharim Tamevatmanam atmastam. Tamevatmanam atmastam. Sarva bhutesh avastitam. Sarva bhutesh avastitam. Pujayatvam grinantascha. Pujayatvam grinantascha. Jayantascha sakritarim. Jayantascha sakritarim. Tamevatmanam atmastam. Sarva bhutesh avastitam. Pujayatvam grinantascha. Jayantascha sakritarim. Tamevatmanam atmastam. Sarva bhutesh avastitam. Pujayatvam grinantascha. Jayantascha sakritarim. Tamevatmanam atmastam. Sarva bhutesh avastitam. Pujayatvam grinantascha. Jayantascha sakritarim. Tamevatmanam atmastam. Sarva bhutesh avastitam. Pujayatvam grinantascha. Jayantascha sakritarim. Tam, unto him, eva, certainly, atmanam, the Supreme Soul, atmastam, within your hearts, sarva, all. Jagannath Baladev Subhachadevi ki jai, Shri Shri Gaunitai ki jai. Bhuteshu, in every living being, avastitam, situated, pujayatvam, just worship him, grinantaha, cha, always chanting, jayantaha, cha, always meditating upon, asakrit, continuously, harim, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Therefore, O sons of the King, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, is situated in everyone's heart. He is also within your hearts. Therefore, chant the glories of the Lord and always meditate upon Him continuously. Purport. The word asakrit is significant, for it means not just for a few minutes, but continuously. That is the instruction given by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his Shikshastaka. Kirtanya Sada Hari. The holy name of the Lord should be chanted 24 hours daily. Therefore, in this Krishna consciousness movement, we request the devotees to chant at least 16 rounds on their beats daily. Actually, one has to chant 24 hours daily, just like Thakur Haridas, who was chanting the Hare Krishna mantra 300,000 times daily. Indeed, he had no other business. Some of the Goswamis, like Raghunath Das Goswami, were also chanting very rigidly and also offering obeisances very rigidly. As stated in Srinivacharya's prayer to the 6 Goswamis, Sat Goswami Ashtaka, Sankhya Purvaka Namaga Natibi Kalasvasanti Krita. The word Sankhya Purvaka means maintaining a numerical strength. Not only was Raghunath Das Goswami chanting the holy name of the Lord, but he was also offering obeisances in the same prolific numbers. Because the princes were ready to enter into some severe austerity in order to worship the Lord Shiva advised them to constantly chant of and meditate upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is significant that Lord Shiva personally offered his prayers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, just as he was taught by his father, Lord Brahma. Similarly, he was also preaching to the princes according to the Parampara system. One not only should practice the instructions received from the spiritual master, but should also distribute this knowledge to one's disciples. The words Atmanam, Atmastam and Sarvabhuteshu Avastitam are also significant. The personality of Godhead is the origin of all living entities, because the living entities are parts and parcels of the Lord. He is the father of all of them. One can search out the Supreme Lord very easily within one's heart, for he is situated in every living entity's heart. In this verse, the process of worshipping the Lord is considered to be very easy and complete, for anyone can sit down anywhere and in any condition of life and simply chant the holy names of the Lord. By chanting and hearing, one automatically engages in meditation. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gnanjana Shalakaya Chakshuram Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gramayam Dadati Swabharantikam Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Bhagishayasya Vadane Lakshmiryasya Chavakshasi Yasyaste Hridaye Samvit Tam Narasimham Aham Bhaje Pralada Hridayaladam Bhakta Vityavidaram Sharatindurachim Vande Parindra Vandanam Harim. To verse once more. Therefore, O sons of the King, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, is situated in everyone's heart. He is also within your hearts. Therefore, chant the glories of the Lord and always meditate upon Him continuously. So here the instructions of Lord Shiva are some kind of conclusive sentences, statements. Therefore, he emphasizes how Krishna is situated in everyone's heart as the Paramatma, and that one therefore should chant the glories of the Lord always, meditating upon Him constantly. So he indicates, since there is a presence of the Lord, from there it kind of follows that one should try to connect to this presence of the Lord. If there wouldn't be any Krishna, what would be the point of trying to connect to Him also internally? So it's again confirmed and emphasized, Krishna is within every living entity's heart, and it is actually the interest of the self to realize that. In my profession, I meet people who, on the mental platform, have learned consciously or subconsciously to disconnect a lot from what's happening in their body, what's happening in the mind. There's so-called dissociation. There are even disorders called dissociative disorders, where people really are totally cut off from certain experiences. They have even kind of blackouts. They don't remember. They lose time, as they say. They walk out this door and find themselves perhaps down there at the tram station, and in between that's missing. So it's kind of cut off, dissociated. And it has its reasons. And also sometimes when maybe you also notice that when you talk to people, sometimes in a conversation, sometimes your mind is gone and you think, what did you just say? There's also some kind of disconnecting, dissociation. But human beings do that, and on a material platform, or that's something we can observe and that's happening, but also in a deeper sense we also disconnect from Krishna, which doesn't prove that He isn't there. It just proves we have no connection. Right? That's something very important, because sometimes the argument is brought, the absence of a certain experience is proof for the non-existence of that what I'm supposed to experience. But it's clear, we say, how does the saying go? With this absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, was it like this? Anyway, where the conclusion is, you cannot conclude from that you can't see something or like something's not in your experience, that's proof that it doesn't exist. So Krishna is in everyone's heart, and at the same time he stays hidden, and that has a reason, because he doesn't interfere with the living entity's desire to be disconnected, independent, as we say. At the same time, he's available and has an interest to say, okay, but please remember where you actually belong to. And the Paramatma feature that is highlighted here in this verse is not even Krishna's Supreme Personality of Godhead, it's his so-called localized aspect, as we learn also from the Bhagavad Gita, since there one of the 5 topics is the Ishvara. And although Krishna speaks the Bhagavad Gita, a lot of description is about the Paramatma feature of himself. Like the whole 13th chapter is discussing the relationship between the Paramatma, the Atma, and Prakriti, the material nature, in order to re-establish that there is a connection, first of all, and that the living entity's interest is in understanding that, or like reconnecting to the Lord in the heart. Because in the spiritual world also there is no Paramatma in that sense. The Paramatma has its function in regards to material energy. It said, Upatrashtanumantaja bharata bhakta maheshwaraha paramatmeti chapyukto dehismin purusha paraha. That the Paramatma is the overseer and permitter in regards to what's happening in the material world. The living entities have desires and he governs what's happening. Paramatmeti chapyukto dehismin purusha paraha. Next to the living entity is another supreme enjoyer, the overseer and permitter, which is the Supreme Lord and also known as the Super Soul. And he's guiding, he's distributing fairly the results of actions. And last time we also talked about, again, the time factor. And it's also said the time factor, or Kala Shakti, is an energy of Vishnu that he uses to control material energy, control living entities. And with it he creates, and with it also he destroys. It's also described in the 13th chapter. He develops all and devours all. So the Super Soul is not only maintaining, he's also destroying. It's all his energy, all his forces. So and Vishnu also, the very name Vishnu means that he is he who pervades everything, who is present everywhere. The Paramatma is also a feature said in every atom. Brahma Samhita describes that he's present within any atom. He pervades everything. And therefore he's conscious of everything. Everything is maintained by him, its energy. And the origin of this Paramatma is the Vishnu feature in Vaikuntha. Narayan, the original Narayan, who comes from Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, but this feature of the Lord, the Paramatma, is accompanying the conditioned souls. And according to how they develop their devotion to the Lord, also of course Krishna might reveal himself more and more in the heart in a particular form. That's more of an advanced stage. But the yogis particularly, it said they focus on the Paramatma and realize that, and I want to also read 1-2 quotes in regards to that. And since it is here mentioned that one should meditate upon him continuously, and Srila Prabhupada opens the purport with the word asakrit is significant, for it means not just for a few minutes but continuously. That is the instruction given below Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his Shikshastakam. Chaitanya Sadahari. The holy name of the Lord should be chanted 24 hours daily. So of course here comes in the connection to chanting the holy names, but also otherwise the contemplation is important. So we are supposed to have Krishna in mind all the time. I mean, if you say 24 hours, of course it means at some point when you sleep, ideally that also your mind is somehow or other busy with thinking of Krishna. Or when you're not explicitly chanting, that your mind is somehow or other thinking of Krishna. So in this way, you stay connected and don't disconnect. Because that happens quickly through to the influence of the three modes of nature, to situations, through people, that our mind gets takes its focus off, or like stops contemplating the Lord and contemplates other things. And so that's always advised. One has to withdraw the mind from all the other things and try to keep it focused on Krishna. And I would like to quote another 2-3 verses from the 13th chapter, because for this we need the mind as a tool. It's also said in the sixth chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, we understand that for the yoga process, the main tool is our mind. Because what means meditation? It means focusing the mind, thinking, feeling, remembering, contemplating. That's all functions of the mind, accompanied by intelligence and so on. So therefore the mind is so much relished and also emphasized that one has to purify it and control it so that the mind is able to do that. We know also from our material lives, if you're not focused on something, if you not have a commitment, if you don't contemplate like your success or your projects, you won't go anywhere. Just like your mind wanders here and there. And so the mind is our main tool. If there's, for example, a clear or strong determination, if I have conviction, if I can truly, if I'm grounded in a strong faith of something, then I can focus. There's also the term drita vrataha. This is also mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. Those who are situated in spiritual life, they have a firm conviction. Drita vrataha means a clear intention. Vrata is the vow. They're firm, like that. This is what I'm going to do. Period. And that's it. So they settle for spiritual life. They settle for Krishna. And of course the mind has also other desires, and they come in. Why don't you settle also for this and settle for that? And so that's our inner fight, to always set priorities, to not be diverted, to keep on, to stay on the track of Prabhupada uses this word rigorously, chanting here in Prabhupada, rigorously paying obeisances, no, rigidly, yeah. And to really stay there. Rigid is a term, has a negative connotation, because rigid means it's too firm, it's stiff, it's immovable. Why? How can it be good? We need dynamic, we need balanced. And that's true, but here rigid means like firm, with firm determination. That it becomes important, that it becomes a priority. That I think, as soon as I catch myself, actually I don't really have Krishna in mind with me, okay, to really be firm and say, okay, back to it. And stay. And therefore, we need to create a space within the mind where you can go to. If you don't have a space within our mind where we have established, let's say, a certain image of Krishna. Everyone has, when we talk of Krishna, all of you think of a particular inner image that you connect with Krishna. Right? Sometimes we have to think a bit deeper, but this is also meditation, to have in a mental space where you say, here I can go, and there Krishna is within my mind. And the more this place is established, the easier and the better you can go and stay there. Because if it's not there, then it's like you kind of wander around. So the mind is very important. Also, we use, for example, in therapy, I use imagination techniques, mental images, to produce them, to help people to get their mind away from a lot of negativity and maybe traumatic experiences. And mental images are powerful if you establish them, if you learn to meditate upon a particular image, then you also create feelings. Because every inner image is also, the mind is thinking, feeling. They don't just think of things usually and don't feel anything. Usually what you think of also influences you emotionally in some way at least. Depending how much you absorb, your feelings might be stronger, they might be sometimes a bit neutral. But essentially each image, if you for example now would tell you, think of Ukra Narasimhadev in Mayapur, then your mind associates experiences and feelings and thoughts. And if I tell you, think of Bahnhofstrasse in Zurich, automatically also your mind connects certain thoughts and feelings with it. Right? So it's something to be conscious of, that the inner images, they do a lot in terms of how we feel, also spiritually. So the mind needs to have powerful spiritual images also, you know. And the Srimad Bhagavatam also gives powerful images, like in the second canto. There's the second chapter, it's called The Lord in the Heart, and it describes this particular Paramatma feature very detailed. You know, how he's present there on the lotus of the heart in 4 arms, all the items, I guess so. So this is there, and the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is saying, I have to shortly connect with the internet, because there's a verse, maybe I cannot quote it with Sanskrit, but I get, no, wait, it's not in the 13th chapter, I'm mistaken, it's in the 6th chapter. It's the 7th verse saying, Chitatmana prashantasya paramatma samahita shitoshna sukha dukeshu tatamana pamanayo. For one who has conquered the mind, the supersoul is already reached, for he has attained tranquility. To such a man, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same. Chitta Atmana, one who has conquered the mind. For this person, the supersoul is already reached, it is said. So the mind is also has the mirror effect. So through the cleansed mind, we can see the true self, but also the super self. And Srila Prabhupada just writes a short purport on that. He says, actually, every living entity is intended to abide by the dictation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is seated in everyone's heart as Paramatma. When the mind is misled by the external illusory energy, one becomes entangled in material activities. Therefore, as soon as one's mind is controlled through one of the yoga systems, one should be considered to have already reached the destination. One has to abide by superior dictation. When one's mind is fixed on the superior nature, he has no alternative but to follow the dictation of the Supreme. The mind must admit some superior dictation and follow it. And the effect, here he says, the effect of controlling the mind is that one automatically follows the dictation of the Paramatma, the Super Soul. So that's also, sometimes the question comes up, how do I know that what I feel and think and what guides me internally, my inspirations, is Paramatma or just my mind? You know, this is question. We can have one criteria here, like by understanding, okay, how controlled is my mind? So what does control of mind mean? What would you say? What would be your definition of, how would you recognize that you have a controlled mind?
One thing is that how much you can absorb, how much time you can absorb in something. There's some definition, I don't know where, in some Purana or something. 3 seconds, 120 seconds, 30 minutes. I think 30 minutes is Samadhi. If you can think of Krishna 30 minutes without interrupting thoughts, then this is called Samadhi. And so you can kind of see how long is your attention span in a subject that you want to absorb. And especially Krishna, I guess.
Okay, thank you. Great. Further thoughts?
And if our whole life is molded according to the desire of Guru and Krishna, and as also in Bhagavad Gita is explained, that one with God means not one like in the oneness, but acting according to His will, and then is our mind controlled.
Yes, so if our interest is tuned into Krishna, so if you feel like, we are being selfless, so to speak, we want to follow the superior dictation as the purport says. Right? More thoughts?
I think mind control is also not, I think the thoughts always can come up, but how you act with them. If you listen to the mind, or like get controlled by the mind, or control the mind.
Yes, to have a sense of whether I'm in control, I'm at choice, or am I dragged or like controlled by the mind. Yeah, we were just talking about, like, because we talked about Paramatma in the verse from 6th chapter where it says, for one who has conquered the mind, the super soul is already reached. And the question is, how would I recognize that my mind is controlled? You also want to comment on that?
How to recognize that?
How can I recognize that my mind is controlled? How could I be, be aware of that, or like have certainty? Oh yeah, now actually my mind is controlled. You want to add? Otherwise. Yes, in accordance, yeah. We had. Mm-hmm.
Who said something. He said, calm mental state in all situations, whether favorable or difficult.
Can you say this again?
Calm mental state in all situations, whether difficult or
whether difficult or favorable. Yes, here also, as the verse says, for he has attained tranquility. To such a man, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same. So, yeah, being unaffected by duality, the circumstances don't matter in a sense. We keep our focus, so we're not moved around by the changes also of the world. And the more we attain this steadiness, the more we can be indifferent to whether it's like this or like that in the execution of our spiritual practice, that we can understand we actually have our mind in control and are not controlled by the mind. So it's actually a big task. You can understand, I feel affected every day in so many ways. But one thing also Lucas mentioned is like the extent to which I'm able to concentrate my mind on a particular meditation, to extend that continuously, that's mind control, to prioritize a certain thinking, a certain feeling, a certain willing also, creating spiritual desires and so on. Yes, and this is important because if we want to follow this instruction, like as Shiva gives here, the super soul, he's also in your heart, therefore chant the glories of the Lord and always meditate upon him continuously. So we need some kind of tools and some understanding, how do I get my mind in shape, so to speak. And in a nectar of instruction, also Rupa Goswami, in the text 8, describes the essence of all advice, which is practically what Srila Prabhupada also writes here in the purport. He's saying the essence of all advice is that one should utilize one's full time, 24 hours a day. We had this in the purport. In nicely chanting and remembering the Lord's divine name, transcendental form, qualities and eternal pastimes, thereby gradually engaging one's tongue and mind. In this way one should reside in Raj and serve Krishna under the guidance of devotees. One should follow in the footsteps of the Lord's beloved devotees who are deeply attached to his devotional service. And in this purport, Srila Prabhupada quotes Srila Bhaktivinoda Saraswati Thakur's explanation of different stages of meditation. What does it mean? How does it develop our ability to meditate? And here the quote goes, in the neophyte state, one should always engage in hearing Krishna Katha. Also in the advanced stage. This is called Shravana Dasha, the stage of hearing. By constantly hearing the transcendental holy name of Krishna and hearing of his transcendental form, qualities and pastimes, one can attain to the stage of acceptance called Varana Dasha. So from hearing comes then the first step, acceptance. Means you allow practically to be more in a, you allow the connection. When one attains this stage, he becomes attached to hearing Krishna Katha. When one is able to chant in ecstasy, he attains the stage of Smaranavasta, the stage of remembering. Recollection, absorption, meditation, constant remembrance and trance are the 5 items of progressive Krishna Smarana. which means remembrance of Krishna. At first, remembrance of Krishna may be interrupted at intervals, but later remembrance proceeds uninterrupted. When remembrance is uninterrupted, it becomes concentrated and is called meditation. So if you have people around and we talk about meditation, and they ask, yeah, what do you meditate upon? How do you do meditation? And we say, that's what we do. You know, it's very particular, because of course people now, meditation is one of these words that means everything and nothing. You know, like spirituality and so many things. But actually we have a very specific understanding of what meditation means. And from here we can understand from this levels, the beginning is hearing. It's always the ability to hear. And interesting, it's not the chanting at the first place. The most important is even the hearing, that I take it in, and then maybe as in resonance also chant. So the first is actually, it's a receptive approach, that I first receive sound vibration, then also myself respond with sound vibration. Also, if you're in a kirtan, first the singer is singing, we could also take this example, but also from hearing shlokas from the Bhagavatam. So first we absorb sound, and then also we vibrate sound in resonance with that, or we learn how to do that. So the idea is to actually stay on track, stay on topic, and to be able to remember. You know, recollection, absorption, meditation, constant remembrance. Of course, then the mind needs input. You know, the mind remembers what you feed him, practically. You know, but of course there are layers and levels. There are certain, how it's called, the imprints that we have. What's this? Some scars and so on. Some things we remember even we don't want to. And other things we want to remember, but we don't get to because the imprint is not strong enough. So it's also important. It's not just too simple. Oh yeah, just input. There's also the way of how input happens, and how do I really embrace and connect to it. I find it interesting to hear the words acceptance is in the beginning when he speaks of first there's Krishna Katha, Shravana Dasha, and then a stage of acceptance called Varana Dasha is there, because we can hear many things, but accepting I would understand also as embracing, kind of, and non-acceptance is kind of I not really let it close to me. So it's a form of Shraddha also, to have faith in what I hear. You know, if something really gets to me and I feel, oh yes, that's a powerful thing, or this I really believe, then I then remember it more deeply than if I doubt it, for example, or find it nonsense. You know, so therefore it's so important also to clarify doubts in spiritual life, because it can hear many things so many times, but if my mind feels, yeah, it's okay, but I don't buy it, I don't believe in it, so not so much value. So, and therefore, here Manu Prabhu mentioned, like when it was about how do I recognize whether my mind is controlled, he says also if my life is molded according also to instructions of Guru and Krishna, you know, if I'm really in tune, if I'm in acceptance with this whole kind of body of literature, for example. And therefore one needs to create circumstances in one's life that help one, that enable one to actually feed the mind properly, and to then, in order to absorb. And I'm very grateful and I appreciate the opportunity again to be teaching with the Bhakti Shastri course, for example, because that's so much absorption, that's so much recollection, memory, not just because I want to, I also have to. If you have a little bit of ambition, you want to do a good service, and maybe absorb a bit deeper, have a bit more information, think ahead often what kind of questions come, what kind of doubts would come, what are my own doubts perhaps. So it's a much more intensified, how you say, Auseinandersetzung? Engagement with, yeah, more like the type of engage yourself with the philosophy and learning verses. Because if you sit there, of course you know some verses, but over time, if you don't recite them regularly, and then you test someone, that verse, and you don't want to sit there with the book and read whether it's correct. You want to be able to say, okay, here, and recognize if it's a proper mantra. And the more you do that, to learn, the more you think of it. The more you think of it, the more you absorb in it. And perhaps also we talked before also about mental images. You develop some type of meditation, because the verses of course say something. If you think of Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate, Supreme Godhead is full and complete, and He's not formless in His form. And then if you think about it deeply, then yes, automatically you are there. Or like with any other parts of the Bhagavad Gita and so on. And if you preach, if you distribute books, you have a certain absorption. Constantly think of it. You have to be able to meet also certain challenges and questions and doubts, but also strategies. You have to keep focus. Same with the deities. You have a certain meditation. You absorb. There's a particular way of mood and how to do things. So, therefore, the life circumstances, if they are favorable, that our mind is really absorbed in Krishna, then this remembrance and always meditation is possible. And one of the big enemies within our services might be just routine consciousness. It's just routine, got to do, and it becomes more and more unconscious. I'm there. My body and mind is working kind of, but I'm not fully there. I'm not fully in experience. And this also, Indra Prabhu also mentioned once, one of the obstacles for progress in devotional life is mediocrity. Mediocrity, Durchschnittlichkeit, just like 0815 we say also in German. This was a 0815 was a standard size of certain trousers or clothes or whatever. So if something is really just average, it's 0815. And so that's also one thing one should not be satisfied with. in spiritual life, to not be mediocre. Or Prabhupada sometimes criticizes the kind of pious, kind of mood. Piety is like in itself, of course, not a wrong thing. How do we say? In German you have this word also, frömmeln. It comes from pious, but if someone is more like kind of externally or like having his kind of status quo, I go to church once a week and therefore I'm very spiritual. So, but it's not very passionate or like, how to say, deep. And that's what's wanted, that one develops a thirst for enter deeper into philosophy, enter deeper into spiritual practice, to more connect with the Lord. And then one is really on the way to progress. Simply routine and mediocre practice will not do the job, so to speak. So then one can keep oneself on track, always check, am I in a routine mood or like kind of mediocre, or am I really trying to be excellent or deep and absorbed and have a desire to progress. Yes, so and then the chanting that is mentioned here in the verse is also the same thing. Srila Prabhupada talks of chanting this 24 hours daily, and it requires that there is space for the chanting, that we make it priority, and also when we do it, be present. Alright, that's actually what I've got to say. If there are any comments or questions. Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Devi ki jai, Shri Shri Gaunitai ki jai.
Just one purport from the Bhagavatam came into my mind about not to be pious but really to endeavor. And Prabhupada is saying here, an easygoing life and attainment of perfection in transcendental realization cannot go together. The Lord is more clever than any living entity, therefore He wants to see how painstaking the devotee is in devotional service.
Yeah, thank you. Grantarot Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
44 ist Dhyana, ein Teilsatz Dhyana, sich Samadhi. Nicht so einfach, aber wir reden schnell, 12 Sekunden.
20 Mantras.